Hi there, Alan Denman, writer on a boat. Welcome. This is, I think, episode 7 of Writer on a Boat. And who is this for? Just to tell you again, this is for all writers looking for tips and techniques to improve their storytelling in any form, whether it be film, novel, short story, play, because I believe that the principles of storytelling at heart are the same. And this is also for people who want to have a deeper understanding of story, because it is my belief that the more you understand how stories work, how they're created, what the inner mechanics are, the more you will appreciate them and the more discerning you will be as well. Because we are surrounded by story on film, television, Netflix, novels, libraries, and so forth. But in my view, and it's only my view, many of these stories are not very good. They're not inspiring. And so the question is, what stories are we telling ourselves today? What do we listen to? How discerning are we? How good are the stories? So that's my little preamble. I've had my little rant, if you like. What I was talking about next week is that there is a sort of magic to a story of any kind, because it is creating a virtual world, a duplicate world that's similar to this one often, but not quite the same. And I described it like the role of a storyteller, and this is the very first challenge that all storytellers face, is that how to get your audience or your reader from their cold seat in ordinary reality into the world of the story. How do you draw them in and keep them out? Keeping them there is another question, and we'll look at that at another time. When I mentioned about the proscenium arch, so I said visualize a proscenium arch, and we're used to that from theatre. And we are used to seeing ourselves sat in a seat, facing a stage. There is the arch, and through the arch, this other world appears of characters, story, and it unfolds before our eyes. And in our imagination, if the play is well told, well acted, and so forth, we are transported into that world. So here's the clue. This is the first secret of storytelling, and this is one of the biggest mistakes, I think, that storytellers of all kinds make. And that is, they don't get, if we just come down here now, look down here, I've created a very primitive proscenium arch. And on this side of the proscenium arch is the ordinary world. This is, imagine people reading a book, or sat in rows, or sat watching television or film, and here they are. Now your role as a storyteller is to get people in through here, through the proscenium arch, into the world where there's these little characters. And I brought back the mole rats for this episode. You've met them before if you've seen other episodes. And so here's the first clue, the first secret, and I think this is one of the biggest mistakes writers make, and that is, you have to make people here in their seats feel something for one of the characters, at least one of the characters, usually the protagonist. We have to feel something for them, and then something psychologically happens. When that emotion, it may be an emotion of fear or sympathy, is aroused, our imaginations start to lift off, and we start to then start to imagine that we are entering this world. We journey through this arch. And of course, the only time you see a proscenium arch is in theatre, but imagine there's a proscenium arch, if you like, in a film, in a cinema. It's the edge of the screen. And when you sit down, it's the edge of the page in a novel. That is a kind of proscenium arch. But the secret is that we have to care for and identify with one of these characters, whether it's Mr. Mole Rat or Mrs. Mole Rat. We must be able to relate to them in some way. And when our emotion is stirred, something happens in our right brain. Our imagination starts to lift off. And then once that happens, we find that we're no longer in the ordinary world here in our seats, watching, reading, whatever we're doing, we find that we have traveled into this imaginary world, which may feel very real in its own way, but it is different to being in the ordinary world. So I think this is one of the biggest mistakes that writers make. And this, if you don't succeed in this, you have in effect failed as a storyteller, because you're not going to get people into the story world. You haven't got them to care for at least one of the characters. And if you don't achieve that, then they are going to remain this side of the proscenium arch in the cold seats, you know, and they're not going to journey into the story world. So that's really what I'm talking about this week. I hope that makes sense. And I'll just give you an example. A very successful television series is Succession. And I thought, well, I ought to have a look at this, and I do this regularly just to see what has been very popular and why, and try and analyze it a little bit. And I had real difficulty with Succession because I didn't care for any of the characters, and I found them really rather unlikable. And in that respect, I said, I'm not sure I want to watch any more of this series. And so that was a problem for me. Maybe for other people, they could relate to at least one of the characters, but I thought it was not attractive. It didn't pull me in. So that's just one example. Maybe you can think of other examples. And this would be one reason why you don't get drawn in to a film that you're watching. And don't worry about the hype. It's whatever its rating is on Rotten Tomatoes or IMDb and so forth, whatever the critics say. The litmus test for you as a reader or a viewer is, do you care about any of the characters, and do you care sufficiently to let yourself journey through the proscenium arch into this imaginary world? That's it for today. I hope that's interesting, and see you next week.